Probably all of you have seen this before. A mosquito buzzing through a prehistoric forest 65 million years ago lands on a dinosaur, takes a sip of blood and gets trapped. Over millions of years, that resin hardens into amber. Fast forward to modern day. Scientists crack open that amber, extract the dinosaur blood from the mosquito's belly, and boom, dinosaurs are back. It's one of the most iconic moments from Jurassic Park. But here's the fact, that scene is certainly impossible in real life. No paleontologist agrees this can be done. And that's where science fiction ends and real documentary begins. DNA is a fragile molecule. Even under perfect conditions, it slowly breaks apart. Scientific studies estimate that DNA has a half-life of about 521 years. And that means in chemistry, the time it takes for half of something to break down. So for DNA, after 521 years, 50% of DNA bonds remain intact. After 1042 years, 25% remain, and after 1563 years, 12.5% remain. After many thousands of years, the DNA is broken into tiny, unreadable fragments. This doesn't mean the DNA disappears completely. It just becomes too fragmented to reconstruct the original sequence. That means after a few million years, the genetic code is so fragmented that it's basically unreadable. Dinosaurs went extinct 66 million years ago. So any DNA in that mosquito would have completely degraded long before we ever found it. Second problem, in Jurassic Park, amber protects the mosquito like a magical preservation chamber. In reality, amber still allows heat, radiation, oxygen, and chemical reactions to damage the DNA over time. Even insects preserved in amber for only a few million years rarely contain usable genetic material. Third problem, the mosquito's blood wouldn't survive intact. When a mosquito feeds, it immediately starts digesting the blood. Enzymes break the DNA down quickly, sometimes within hours. By the time the mosquito got trapped in resin, most of the dinosaur DNA would already be degraded. And even if tiny fragments survived, they had likely be contaminated with the mosquito's DNA, microbes, fungi, and modern environmental DNA. Reconstructing a complete dinosaur genome from that mess would be like trying to rebuild a shredded encyclopedia with most of the pages missing. In short, building a dinosaur genome would require recoverable dinosaur DNA, a close modern relative for comparison, advanced genome reconstruction, synthetic chromosome engineering, and a viable embryo host. So while Jurassic Park gave us one of the coolest scientific ideas in movie history, the reality is far less biologically plausible. Welcome to Out of the Den, where I show and tell stranger than fiction stories among other real events from natural history without compromising on the science.
There's like my favorite joke. I have a few.
I'm not sure which of them is more favorite joke of mine. See, I'm dealing with strong contenders here. When tech entrepreneur Nikita Bayer recently posted a question in X that whether a real-life Jurassic Park project might actually be fundable, Elon Musk replied, "I hope someone makes it work." I mean, imagine what I created in my previous video with AI to show evolution from fish to dino to establish large mammals like rhinos weren't around then. They are talking about bringing it back all to life. Just a reminder, DNA breaks down over time. Usable DNA rarely survives more than 1 million years. Dinosaurs went extinct 66 million years ago. That means 100% of dinosaur DNA is gone. People imagine fossils as preserved bodies, but fossilizations actually destroy the organisms. This alone kills the entire Jurassic Park project concept. Some researchers proposed modifying bird embryos to express dinosaur traits. For example, experiments by Jack Horner attempted to create a chickenosaurus, This could produce an animal with teeth, a long tail, clawed wings, but it would not be a real dinosaur, just a modified bird, a kind of hybrid. Even partial DNA wouldn't be enough to create this. To clone an animal, you need a complete genome sequence and a compatible egg cell. We would also need a close living relative to carry the embryo. For dinosaurs, birds like Gallus gallus, the 9-colored birds from my last Kaziranga documentary, might be the closest relative. Still, the evolutionary gap is 150 million years. The embryo development programs are totally different. Also, we need the full genome sequence, as I mentioned, correct developmental biology. None of that is currently possible for dinosaurs. This will be like you are trying to recreate Shakespeare's Othello and you know 10 used English letters from the play. And if you think the operative word is currently, even if we develop technology so that dinosaurs could be recreated artificially, made to evolve again, say suppose from scratch, ecosystems currently are completely different. Mammals dominate large animal niche. Continents and climate have changed drastically. So the chance of T-Rex evolving again is effectively null. Example, Woolly Mammoth Revival efforts made by Harvard along with other biotech organizations. Asian elephant has 99.6% similar DNA. So what they did is they extracted elephant's DNA, tried to replicate the thick fur and generated cold resistance. Result, a hybrid mammoth-like elephant, not a true woolly mammoth. An elephant that can survive Arctic condition basically. So it would look similar to a mammoth but would not be genetically identical, even though they went extinct only about 4,000 years ago. Like last year, a US biotechnology company called Colossal Biosciences announced that researchers had produced 3 puppies intended to resemble the extinct dire wolf, which vanished around 10,000 to 13,000 years ago. Headlines called it de-extinction breakthrough. So I saw many nature channels on Instagram was posting about this as a complete breakthrough. But the animals are genetically modified grey wolves with traits meant to resemble dire wolves. They are not true dire wolves. They created from complete ancient DNA. De-extinction only works for recent extinctions with available DNA. Real de-extinctions research focuses on animals that died very recently, such as dodo, thylacine. These species went extinct somewhere around 100 to 1000 years ago. Even woolly mammoth is also kind of plausible. That's recent enough because DNA fragments still exist, close relatives still exist. Still problematic. Dinosaurs are too far in the past. No DNA survives. Also, most of such genetically engineered animals, they collapse within minutes, like Pyrenean ibex. Ironically, dinosaurs already survived, in a sense. Modern birds, sparrows, chickens, eagles are living dinosaurs, the only surviving branch of the dinosaur lineage, so to speak. But I guess Musk likes dinosaurs but doesn't have any affinity towards birds. After all, he rebranded Twitter to X, removing the bird branding completely.
Instead of DNA, scientists have made progress in identifying short protein sequences like collagen from dinosaur soft tissue. While proteins are more durable than DNA, they provide only tiny fragments of information about the animal's biology, not a full genome. So the dream of reconstructing a complete real dinosaur genome from DNA is a science fiction. However, scientific advancement in comparative cytogenomics are rapidly improving our understanding of what dinosaur genomes looked like and how they functioned. Nevertheless, it is highly unlikely that cytogenomics or any current scientific method will ever produce a real, complete and functional full genome sequence of a non-avian dinosaur like T-Rex or Triceratops. Now, one pattern I have noticed about Elon Musk is that he makes numerous bold, outrageous or unlikely claims, and a few of them eventually come true, leading to a perception of prophetic accuracy. If I ask you to make 10 future claims, as a matter of fact, 1 or 2 will come true. And this is related to psychology, statistics, and known as broken clock phenomenon. This is a colloquial term based on the proverb, even a broken clock is right twice a day. It suggests that if someone makes enough predictions or claims, eventually some will align with reality purely by chance, even if the person's predictive ability is generally poor. It often happens with astrologers. If they make 10 predictions for you and 1 or 2 major ones come true, your cognitive bias will make it selectively recall much more and you will forget the rest. You will focus on those few predictions that came true and ignore the massive number of failed promises, missed deadlines, or absurd claims that never materialized. People remembered when Elon Musk was right about electric cars becoming mainstream, but forget the numerous times his self-driving timelines were missed, hyperloops, and several such examples. So observers often refer to Musk time, a paradoxical phenomenon where his projected timelines are notoriously inaccurate, often years later, yet his companies often eventually deliver on impossible goals. Critics call this pathological optimism or corporate puffery, while supporters see it as setting aspirational goals to push teams faster. This is actually the law of truly large numbers. With thousands of tweets, interviews, and company announcements, the probability of making a shocking vague statement that matches a future event is actually quite high. It's a statistical certainty that some outrageous claims will eventually seem genius in retrospect. And this is where the edgelord strategy comes in. Because if you make provocative, outrageous claims to gain attention or start controversy, then you are basically influencing public perception and stock prices also, without necessarily having any plan or thought behind the claim at that juncture. And then with enormous amount of power and unending resources, some of them may come true. So not necessarily this is a long-term vision. Now, suppose hypothetically it happens, right? Suppose that kind of technology is currently not available and in the future something takes place that I am not even imagining. It's beyond science at this point of time.
I wonder one thing though, that there are more than 41,000 plus species currently at the risk of extinction. People with unbridled resources and influence, why they are not focusing to conserve these species rather than trying to bring back animals that already left us and are not suitable for current environment.
And I'm not advocating that all de-extinction related research should stop. Close examination of the genomes of extinct species can tell us much about what made them vulnerable in the first place. Were they in a bottleneck with too little genetic variability? How were they different from close relatives that survived? Techniques being developed for de-extinction will also be directly applicable to living species that are close to extinction. A species with a genetic Achilles heel might be totally cured with an adjustment introduced through cloning. For example, millions of years ago, thylacines, also known as Tasmanian tigers, were widespread across Australia. These dog-like creatures with stripes disappeared from the mainland around 2000 years ago. They remained in Tasmania until the 1920s when they were slaughtered by European colonizers who saw them as a threat to livestock. It was a human-driven extinction. European settlers came to Australia and brutally obliterated this animal. So it kind of makes sense to try to resurrect thylacine because it was such an important marsupial. Every major museum wanted one in their collection. So there are hundreds of samples around the globe and some are exceptionally well preserved. And although it's in pretty good condition, the DNA isn't completely whole. Over time, exposure to UV light and action of bacteria break down DNA into short fragments. And the older the sample, the smaller the fragments that are left behind, until eventually there isn't enough left, which is why there's no chance of bringing back a dinosaur. So this left scientists with the seemingly impossible task of working out how the various bits of DNA fit together. What they did was they found the closest living relative to the thylacine, which was the donut. Donuts and thylacine share 95% of their DNA, which is thought to be highly conserved, meaning it hasn't changed much over time. So they sequenced the Dunart's genome and compared the genetic code to the extinct species. Then they overlapped them and found where it was exactly different. However, knowing an animal's DNA is simply not enough to bring it back. The next stage of the puzzle involved tweaking the genes of the Dunart so that they match the thylacines. And this can be done with CRISPR-Cas9, the Nobel Prize-winning genome editing method. Take for example Australian gastric brooding frog. Sounding like something out of science fiction horror film, the Australian gastric brooding frog had a remarkable reproductive strategy. The mother frog swallowed the fertilized eggs, brooded the young in their stomachs, and then gave birth by projectile vomiting them through their mouths. When the species was discovered in the 1970s, it was already highly restricted and it went extinct in the 1980s. In 2013, scientists from the University of New South Wales said they had successfully cloned embryos of the species from the cells of one of the last living specimens, but these had failed to develop any further. Another idea is to essentially clone the dead animal by taking the nucleus from an intact cell and then transferring it into an egg of a close living relative in the hope that an embryo will form. The caveat is that you need a complete cell to do that, and cells quickly break down after death. An animal like the thylacine that died out almost 100 years ago simply couldn't be brought back this way. But it could be an option for recently extinct species. However, I cannot completely overlook the ethical considerations. Reintroducing mammoths and thylacines might upset existing ecosystems. Since these animals became extinct, others will have evolved and adapted to fill their place. Thanks to climate change, the environments these creatures once lived in may have changed drastically. Some of the plants woolly mammoths fed on are gone long back. So would mammoths still be able to survive on their own in the wild? I don't think we should bring all the animals back. Probably there should be a certain fitness criteria. For the thylacine, it's a recent extinction event, so its habitat in Tasmania still exists. All the food it used to eat still exists. So there's somewhere for them to go and they can thrive again probably in that environment. The animal also played a critical role in the ecosystem. It was an apex predator, so it sat right at the top of the food chain. There are no other marsupial apex predators, so when it was made extinct, it left a massive gap. The emergence of the fatal Tasmanian devil facial tumor disease is a clear example of what can happen in an ecosystem when sick animals are no longer preyed upon and removed from the population. Thylacines would have helped control the spread of this deadly disease in Tasmania and could have helped prevent the now near extinction of the Tasmanian devil. So how do we go about de-extincting these important animals? If we look at the modern day habitat in Tasmania, as I mentioned, it has remained relatively unchanged. This means it provides the perfect environment to reintroduce the thylacine, enabling it to reoccupy its niche. But bringing back an animal costs a lot of money, and a recent major philanthropic donation has provided 10 years of funding to establish the Thylacine Integrated Genomic Restoration Research Lab to enable the development of novel technologies for marsupial conservation and restoration. The first iteration might be 90% thylacine, while the ultimate goal is more like 99.9%. Eventually, after many years of monitoring the engineered animals in a large enclosed area, Colossal's goal is to release a viable genetically diverse population of perhaps 100 proxythylacines into the wild. However, I want you to understand these are actually not the real ancient animal. To resurrect the Woolly Mammoth, Colossal's researchers plan to introduce mammoth genes into the genome of the Asian elephant, as I mentioned, its closest living relative. They will then try to create an embryo carrying the modified DNA that could gestate in an African elephant surrogate or an artificial uterus. The resulting creature would not be a mammoth per se, but rather a cold-adapted Arctic elephant with small ears, shaggy hair, a domed forehead, and carved tusk. Yet if you show it to somebody, probably people will say, yes, it looks like Woolly Mammoth. Colossal has already fully sequenced the Asian and African elephant genomes, collected more than 50 mammoth genomes and begun making edits to elephant cells. But I think thylacine could turn out to be easier to revive than the mammoth because of the gestation times involved. Thylacine pregnancies are estimated to last just a few weeks compared with 22 months for mammoths. and like any other newborn marsupials, the baby thylacines would be little larger than a grain of rice, so even a diminutive do-not mother could nourish them in her pouch at first. Colossal will work on developing a synthetic pouch as well as marsupial milk formula appropriate for each stage of development. Collectively, these marsupial reproductive technologies could become crucial tools for the conservation of extant species such as koalas or numbats. Even if Colossal could overcome the immense technical challenges involved, comments from Musk in 2026 and Neuralink co-founder Max Hodak suggesting a fundable Jurassic Park in 2021 were speculative, discussing the potential to create novel species or genetic chimeras in terms of super exotic engineered creatures, rather than authentic, scientifically accurate dinosaurs. Musk's recent six-word reply went viral, amassing more than 43 million views at the time of writing. Several users have supported the idea. One user replied, "You are the someone, so you can definitely make it work." Another commented, "If anyone can do it, you can, Elon. You have the resources and the connections, and if you need someone to do the legwork of connecting people, let me know." Movies like Jurassic Park, Avatar, X-Men created a cultural misrepresentation of nature, and many people seemingly believe dinosaurs are reality TV. Resurrecting a population and then reinserting it into habitat where it could supply the ecosystem services of its predecessors is a monumentally bigger project than recreating a couple of pseudo-mammoths to wander around in a zoo. Colossal Biosciences, to be fair, tried to arrest the madness by responding to his tweet. Just to remind you, the claims that dire wolves were brought back from extinction by the company in April 2025 were scientifically inaccurate and misleading, according to numerous independent experts, and later they admitted by themselves. The pups are over 99% genetically grey wolf, not dire wolf. Dire wolves and grey wolves are distantly related, having diverged millions of years ago. Researchers used CRISPR technology to make 20 edits in 14 genes, focusing on external traits like coat color and bone density, rather than recreating the full genome of the ancient species. The white fur color was created by disabling genes, a deliberate choice by the company that is unlikely to represent the true appearance of the prehistoric southern ranging animal. Conservation scientists characterize the announcement as a PR-driven event or designer dog creation, rather than a genuine scientific breakthrough in de-extinction. No prize for guessing why Musk is so interested in such biotech advancement. To create intellectual property around de-extinction can be the ultimate revenue-generating machine, if not supreme ownership over inevitability of death and extinction. Why cut fossil fuel emissions to address the root cause of climate change when we can play with few flashy toys, enough to satiate average human curiosity? So those who are saying he exhibits such techno-optimism in plain jest are blind, by design or by choice. De-extinction thus seems far-fetched, financially problematic, and extremely unlikely to succeed long-term on a planet continually being vastly transformed by human activity. There are also risks beyond immediate failure. Resurrected, previously benign organisms could become pests in new environments, might prove ideal reservoirs or even vectors of nasty plagues, or might even harbor dangerous retroviruses in their genomes. But frankly, I think such problems will probably prove minor compared to the main problem, which is moral hazard. If people take a Jurassic Park fundable future seriously, they will do even less to control the sixth great mass extinction. If nothing is impermanent, life itself will not be treasured because, come on, billionaires based on their whims and fancies can always bring them back. Also, how much Australian Aboriginals we truly consulted with before attempting to bring back thylacine? That animal was part of their livelihood and culture for thousands of years. And what about entire generations of prey populations who by now no longer retain anti-predator behaviors? Predator recognitions can disappear within 13 generations. We are thinking of
causing significant distress to already endangered Asian elephants to bring back a few hybrid mammoth cubs in a laboratory conditions, which will totally ignore the complex social needs of these intelligent animals. The northern white rhino, on the other hand, once roamed parts of Africa in larger numbers, but decades of poaching and habitat destruction pushed it to the brink of extinction. In 2018, the last male, Sudan, died under protection, marking a devastating turning point for the subspecies. Today, only 2 females remain, both unable to reproduce naturally, leaving the species functionally extinct despite still being alive. Scientists are now racing against time, exploring advanced techniques like IVF and genetic preservations in a final attempt to revive the population. But even with technology, the loss serves as a stark reminder of how quickly human actions can erase an entire lineage. I'm no scientist, but I think the breakthrough possibilities in synthetic biology, biobanking, and genetic engineering should not overpower real conservation work of what we have now. Even though I suspect Musk and company generally underrated the genetics, epigenetics, and environmental dimensions of the problem, casually recommending tackling this over a tweet, spreading sensation across gullible mass, spending billions trying to de-extinct a few species, will not compensate for the thousands of species lost to human activity. While it is true that scientists have discovered remarkably well-preserved dinosaur skin, blood vessels, and collagen proteins in fossils, some dating back over 70 million years, dinosaurs cannot be brought back to life with current or any foreseeable technology. The findings, while groundbreaking for understanding dinosaur biology, do not provide the necessary intact genetic code or DNA required for cloning. Also, even if someday it becomes possible, dinosaurs shouldn't be brought back, because reintroduction of a species long extinct like the dinosaurs would functionally be the same as introducing a new invasive species to an ecosystem no longer equipped to support them. And dinosaurs know dolly. I guess people like Elon Musk are intelligent enough to understand that.
It's like my favorite joke. I have a few.